Nobody's born incredible. People who do incredible things simply took the right steps.
This is our journey. This is the hunt for incredible.
In this episode, we continue our conversation with Aubrey Ennis. In the previous episode, we spoke about how he acquired $180 million worth of real estate within his first 3 years from buying multifamilies and hospitals. Be sure to circle back around to that episode if you missed it. In this episode, we talk about how he would do it all over again with no money and no connections, so you can apply it to your own life. All right, without further ado, here's my continued conversation with Aubrey Ennis. All right, so now I want to segue over to the blueprint of if you had to start all over with nothing, no connections. You've already pretty much described what your story was, what your journey was to getting to where you are. And I mean, I still can't get over the numbers, right? Like 180 million within the first 3 years is absolutely bonkers.
It's crazy.
We've touched on what you did to actually get that. So your blueprint may actually be pretty close to what you actually did. I mean, I know I'm taking major pieces of your story and applying it to my own blueprint in life, that's for sure. But if you did have to go back, start over, you have nothing, no connections, no anything, what does it look like to actually lay out a plan? What would you do to accomplish what you have?
It's a good question because I've actually had this conversation with a few of my there's a couple buddies that have, everybody's got friends, but there's a few that they'll ask that question. They've got like something they're trying to do, and they're like, where do I start? It's frustrating because you go and give them, hey, maybe I would start with, this is a book on how to build a business plan. Have you ever built one before? Well, no. Okay, well, here, if I could go back and I knew that this existed then, I would have read this first. And it's almost like a Mad Lib for how to go build a business, right? The Rich Dad series has a lot of good stuff on how to start a corporation, how to exercise an S corp, so forth. But if I had to go back, no connection, back to step one, I think while a lot of it would have stayed the same, I don't want to say I would have gone for an even bigger deal, but I have noticed that I definitely noticed that I have closed 3 times as large deals as the hospital in a third of the time as it took me to close that hospital. And that was strictly on, it might have been my first deal, but the seller was different, the money was different, the lenders were different. I mean, it was all very situational, right? But big deals take just as much work as small deals. And I think I would have focused on, we only did one deal with that first operator that we did the hospital with. I haven't done a deal with them again. Chemistries were just off. They had a certain way of doing things. We had a certain way of doing things, and it didn't mesh. It took me a while to find the guys that I'm rolling with these days. I would search for them first. I would go back and try and find that shop. I think the brokerage was good. I think instead of a real estate brokerage, I probably would have gone to a mortgage broker. Figuring out how to put the debt together, I think, is very, A, useful, but B, you do meet the client, right? Because with a real estate broker, you're brokering to everybody from, the mom and pop to the institutional investor, but a lot of the time you're not hitting that institutional investor for years and years and years, right? You don't get to the big boys until you've built a 10 or 20-year track record. With the mortgage broker side of it, everyone has to come to you, especially if you're with a good shop, somebody very reputable. I don't care if it's institutional or a lot of the mom and pops can't go to those guys, right? Because they haven't built enough credibility, but you can even go get a starting entry point position with them and start meeting that clientele and seeing the deals that they're putting together. And I'm not going to say skip steps, but you can definitely, I think it's okay to jog along a little quicker on some of the startup pieces. But that, and then honestly, go back to, it's reach out. I think if I knew then what I know now, I would definitely have an extremely targeted approach of who I was reaching out to. I think I would know. I could probably skip a few hundred people if I talked to first, but regardless.
So what does that targeted approach look like? Like, what type of person are you looking for? Where are you finding them? Where do those people hang out?
So after, I think, going back to one, pick your Pokemon, right? Figure out your strategy. Where do you want to be at, and what do you want to do with it? And then kind of lay out, too, where does 10 years from there go? So I've met some guys that while we're doing the same thing day in and day out, they want nothing to do with an institutional level of like business volume, right? They don't want to get to that point. They're happy doing a couple deals here and there, keep them rolling with steady pipeline and do their thing. But back to your question, you got to know, I think, who the players are in your strategy. So, all right, I want to go buy a multifamily apartment complex. I would go reach out to, I think kind of a good rule of thumb is you need 3 bids from everybody you go take a proposal from, whether it's waterproofing to a debt bid to an equity partner to, weird stuff. I had sealant put in guardrails on one of my deals the other day. Like, I got several bids for that just to make sure that this guy was $4,000 for it and this guy was $12,000. I want the $4,000 guy, as long as he's doing the same work that the 12 is doing.
Right.
But going and reaching out to 2 or 3 people in each space, I'd reach out to 2 or 3 well-known property managers. Go reach out to 2 or 3 well-known banks. Go reach out to 2 or 3 well-known equity partners. Those are a little harder to find. They're probably the last on the list because once you meet the other team players, you have your property management lined out. You've talked to title. You've talked to the city. You've talked to other operators. You've talked to contractors, GCs, superintendents. Brokers are easy to start with. Don't start with the executive vice president either, or the senior partner at Marcus or at CBRE or whatever. Go hit the senior analyst. That's might be a little plug for the audience. They're looking to get in real estate. You can get a lot out of a senior analyst. They're above the associate level, but they still answer their phone pretty much whenever you call them. You can get a lot of information there, and just go meet those guys. Hey, who are you working with? Who's hot right now? Who's the clients? Who's spending money? Where are they getting it from? Is it coming from California? Is it coming from Canada? Is it domestic capital? Is it overseas? Like, start understanding your landscape. And you can do it even. I figured out Oklahoma. While it wasn't a huge market, I figured out very quickly who the players were in Oklahoma City, and that kind of leveraged. And they said, hey, there's like 8 guys that run Oklahoma City, and a gal, and she's a monster. But and after getting to know those guys, I was like, well, you guys are going to own this for a while, aren't you? And they're like, yeah, we might retire in like 10 years, 15. And I was like, I need a bigger pond. All right, it's probably time to go to Dallas.
Yeah.
So things like that, yeah.
So it sounds like what you're suggesting is you pull the team together and then you go to the equity partners and you say, look, I have all my ducks in a row. Can I have some money? Or is it you look for the person who's experienced, you pull them on your team, and then you go to the equity partners and you say, hey, look, I have, this is my team. This is the person who's helped me pull the deal together. They've done 50 other deals. We're raising X amount of money for a specific property. Or is it we're raising a fixed amount of capital, and we're going to go for these types of properties?
I think it's probably hard to trying to give a chronological step-by-step, but a lot of it's happening simultaneously. I really think the first step is education. Podcasts just like this. There's some really good ones. I was listening to, sitting there digging in the dirt, planting flowers, and I had Bigger Pockets going, right? Just sitting there jamming it because they were a good beginner podcast on real estate. Upgraded that to, we've talked about this, you kind of level up to the next level, and just listening to our lectures.
Well, give some plugs. What are some podcasts that people can listen to?
Real estate specific, Bigger Pockets was a great place to start. Wheelbarrow Profits was kind of a step up into, that gets a little more into like the lending side. One of the partners on there who was running the podcast was actually working for a bank, and he's actually with a large servicing company now that he works for. I was with those for probably 12 months, 18 months even, and that showed me pretty much everything I needed. I started getting into it's called PrivCap, private equity in real estate. That's like institutional capital flows, GP funds, pretty in-depth, advanced stuff. And then after that, I started kind of broadening. I had enough after that to where I wasn't listening to How to Do Real Estate podcasts, because you can get so much education, but the things I'm learning now are not what I'm reading. I'm learning how to physically manage contractors, learning how to physically manage other people in the office, how to manage mentor relationships, how to manage other sponsors. I'm reading, hundreds and hundreds of pages of complex loan docs, learn how to put HUD deals together, Delaware statutory trust deals together, just complex structuring that you can't. No one's going to talk about that on a podcast. You just have to go and do that. But you'll get there after you've done the first several deals. Kind of that to go get the first deal done. I needed someone with track record that trusted me enough, liked my deal, and then we were able to go and put the funding together to go get it done.
Yeah, you start with that intellectual knowledge, and then you have to translate that to the experiential knowledge in order to really understand it.
I mean, especially for a larger deal, those guys know, like, if you've done your homework. And doing your homework is, I was 2.5 years in college of, I'd call it a double major, if you will, in real estate. And learning everything I possibly could, and then starting to reach out. And then I went to a brokerage firm that, taught me how to do it. Had professional training on how to go and underwrite the stuff. So my education level was very high to allow me to go out there. And I said, okay, I think I can do a $20 million deal on the first run. And even then, with all that education and everything else, there was still so much that I didn't know. You need one of the most important pieces, I'd say, is a good attorney. Somebody that knows when they're looking at a legal doc, especially on your behalf if you're getting screwed, how it's supposed to properly be put together, how to properly read a title policy, how to go in and say, hey, there's an easement estate from 2010 that is still here, and it's got X, Y, and Z that, you need to go and address before you close this deal, stuff like that. And a good property management company, right? It's going to sit there. What happens when the deal closes? That's very much where I've been at for the last, year and a half, 2 years now. It's like, all right, well, we've closed the deal. Great, high five. Now the real work starts, right? Now you got to make sure that it operates and you go deliver on what you raised the money on,
Yeah. Robert Kiyosaki with Rich Dad Poor Dad, I'll never forget him saying, attorneys and CPAs are the two things you don't want to skimp out on. And I read that in his books, and then I didn't listen, and then I reflected, talking about that intellectual knowledge translating to the experiential knowledge.
Tribal knowledge, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I read it, and I was like, oh, yeah, okay, and just kind of threw it in the back of my mind. And then I have a couple sad stories of both CPA and attorney mistakes that cost me way more than it would have cost to actually pay that premium for the people who really can deliver.
Give me the attorney one. What happened? Can you talk about it?
The attorney one, it was just a waste of time. So the vehicle registration company, I haven't shared much with you about this. We touched on it a little bit in the podcast with Ryan, but effectively, it was me getting into tech. So I started off as a mechanical engineer, got into operations. I thought I wanted to get into tech, and so the way that I got into tech with no experience was I started a tech company, and that tech company was streamlining the vehicle registration process with the state of Texas. And because we were working with the state, there were a lot of regulations that said we shouldn't be able to do this in a straightforward manner, at least. And so what I did was I obsessively studied the legal code that the state had outlined, and I found some caveats that would have, some gray areas that they had written out where I said, hey, I really think that we can go this direction and build a legal business. And my perspective was the reason that it hadn't been done before was because the barrier of entry was so high, because the workaround was so obscure that I'm guessing people just hadn't spent much time looking into innovating in that space. With the whole legal requirements and stuff, it would have cost a lot to pay attorneys and try to work things around. And so I went on, I don't even remember. I think I'm not going to mention the website name, but there's a website where basically you can hire lawyers, and there's some discount ones, some nicer ones. It's basically like Upwork, except for lawyers.
It's like a Rocket Lawyer or something.
Yeah, it's actually a really cool platform. I didn't leverage it the way that I should have. And basically, I found an affordable attorney and spent a bunch of money because it took a lot of time to build out the legal structure of this business so that we were operating in a way that was in alignment with regulations. And then it ended up just creating a mess because the attorney didn't really know what he was doing, what he was talking about. And I mean, he was affordable for a reason, right? Because you get what you pay for when it comes to attorneys most times.
100%.
And so, we threw this thing together, and just educating myself, I wasn't radically confident in it. And so I reached out. Previously, I worked in research and development for a large enterprise in their engineering department. and I was over the R&D department, and so I was also liaison between R&D and legal to make sure. Well, I mean, it was a large enterprise. We were cranking out patents left and right, so I worked really closely with legal to crank out these patents to make sure that we were secure. And I learned a lot about law, and I'm really fortunate for that. And so I reached out to her, and she connected me with a great lawyer who was like 3 times as much. And I mean, I looked at the cost, and I thought, well, I mean, if he's a lot better, then it'll take less of his time, so maybe it'll end up coming out on top. And I showed him what the more quote unquote affordable, who was actually the more expensive attorney, had written out. And the attorney who had the higher cost per hour, who I was chatting with, pointed out problems in the legal structure that would have ruined us.
Yes.
Absolutely ruined us. And I'm thankful that I reached out to them, because I was like, I just don't know. Like, this doesn't look ironclad. And when it comes to anything legal, but especially legal with the state, like, you're going to lose against the state every single time, because they're the ones who are writing the code.
Especially if you don't have, significant assets
Totally.
to go after.
Exactly.
They'll bleed you dry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, I'm really thankful that more, the higher cost per hour, but overall more affordable attorney was able to tease out some of those things. And so we went through the process of restructuring everything. And so, basically all the capital that I had invested in the lower cost per hour attorney ended up being throwaway work. That was, I mean, the money, that sucked to lose, but also just the time. When it comes to a startup, speed is everything, right? And just the time wasted working with that attorney to build something that was absolutely worthless I chalk it up as a learning experience, right?
Sure.
It's a battle scar that I hopefully will never have to revisit again. But yeah, I mean, CPAs and attorneys, those are everything.
Especially on the loan side. The attorneys on the loan side are, you could almost name your price for it. Because, they're, especially on a complicated structure, like, I think we spent, on the deal that we did, the DST, right? And I was talking to the older partners, and I was like, do we really need the attorneys that are, these guys are, I don't want to say pricey, but I'm talking like, this is like first and second tier, like in the gamut here of price, but also just performance. Like, these are the best of the best. And partner looked at me and goes, I've been doing this for 30 years, and I've never done one of these deals. So, I'm going to pay for it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I want the best of the best. And I was like, okay. And sure enough, like, it's almost like hiring another partner in the deal. But they basically bring you, hey, here's everything in the black and white, and then it's on you to go and make the business decision, right? So, and then the CPA, I've already had a 6-figure boo-boo from, not even like a boo-boo, just I could have saved 6 figures on just the tax side of things, because you pay yourself. I'd say a good plug for audience would be figure out how to use a personal S corp. Do not pay yourself directly from your company.
Yep.
And definitely don't do it for more than 12 months, because whoops.
Yeah.
So
Rich Dad Poor Dad has a book. I just read it. The name is
Tax-Free Wealth.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, that's it.
That's
a solid one.
I was reading chapters of that like 2 weeks ago. Yeah,
dude,
absolutely. It's tax time.
Reading through that made me just like regret every amount of capital that I've tried to save on CPAs. Just actually understanding, because even my CPA, I love her to death. She's fantastic. But there are a lot of areas where reading through that book, I've realized they're
not looking at those things.
I'm hemorrhaging capital from just checking off a box to make sure we're submitting. Yeah.
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 Even if you're saving, you're still paying another half of what you could be.
Yes.
It's ridiculous.
Yes. Okay, so back to the blueprint is you don't save on CPAs and attorneys because the more affordable ones are actually more expensive.
Now, granted, if you're starting out with nothing, you got to find somebody to pay for that.
True.
I had the attorney that he literally went pro bono, and he got paid out of the deal closing. So if it didn't close, we were just square. Let's sell that was like, hey, I will pay you an above average, fee here for your business, but this is our first deal, so there's a good chance this doesn't close and you don't get paid.
And circling back to pulling together an ironclad deal that you can offer to the equity partners, to other people that you want to pull on the team.
Sure.
And you say, hey, I haven't made it yet, at least not enough to be able to front the capital right now.
Yep.
But this is an ironclad deal, and this is everybody I have on my roster, and this is why we're more likely to succeed than anyone else.
Yeah. And I think a big piece of that too is who told me this? It was one of my mentors told me this, but they were like, why would, because I want to say it was the older gentleman. He looked at me and goes, Aubrey, why the hell would anybody use you when they could go to CBRE to do the same job? And I was like, well, Bruce is a great dude. He's like, yeah, it's with a giant brokerage shop that 30 other institutions are going to be bidding on. They're going to have 100 people working on the deal. They're going to smoke you. Why would anybody use you? And I was like, that's a really good point. I don't know, because I guess because I can do it for cheaper. And he goes, all right, that's a good point. That's a good place to start. What else? He goes, how much are you going to make a deal? He's like, you got to make somebody a deal. It's like, nobody's going to, you can go out there and charge market rate that, CB or the big guys are charging. It's like, you can be cheap, and not cheap in your performance, but okay, if the big guys are charging 12%, I can charge 6%, because I'm not trying to fund I don't have 1,000 employees that I need to pay for. I don't have HR and healthcare and overhead and, $2 million in software every year that I'm paying for. Like, that's a few guys that are going out there getting their first few deals done, so we don't need all that, which means we can be, A, extremely flexible, but B, we can be very cost effective. You can go in and, I don't want to say undercut, but it's a big differentiator when you can either A, pay more because you have a better structure, or you can be more cost effective in your overall fee structure, so on and so forth. That perks a lot of ears, because even 1 or 2 percentage points to an investor is a big deal. And if you can do that a few times in a row, you start making a name. Yeah.
So getting back to the blueprint, I guess this question is more at a higher level. You talked about pulling the team together. You talked about getting the equity partners. So let's say those are two components, right? We'll pretend, I know equity partners, you can almost think of them as a team, but we'll go ahead and separate it as like the team that conducts the operational execution, right? And then you have the equity partners. And then let's say there's the third aspect of the deal, which is the property that you're actually acquiring. So
most important part.
So what is that order of operations? Do you pull the team together while you're looking for the deal, and then you don't approach the equity partners until you have the deal, and you say, hey, look, this is I've done the underwriting on this property. This is what the profile looks like. This is how much I'm raising, and this is what you'll get back? Or do you say, hey, this is the type of deal that I'm looking for. This is what we're raising. And once we find it, I'll go ahead and show it to you as well.
And now you're saying when talking to the equity partners?
Yeah.
And so I'd say there's a difference in type of equity partner. There are retail investors. There's institutional investors. There's bridge guys. There's guys that are in the U.S. There's guys that are outside of the U.S. The $22 million that we raised, that was from a group out of Israel. It was one group that just stroked a check. The land that we closed was like 50 guys. They're all retail investors, and they're in for $25 grand, $50 grand, $75 grand, $250,000, $500,000, whatever it is. Most of those guys don't go over $1 million. There's a few guys that can do that amount, but and they usually do it on the land deals, because 20% on a land deal and 15% floor on simple interest is, okay, if I put in $1 million and you're going to pay me 15% simple interest for a 90-day deal, I'm going to make $150 grand plus my money back, and I can go do it again and roll into the next one. That's a no-brainer for those guys, so they can do that. But as far as putting it together, I'd say starting out, property first, underwriting, and then a check and balance with the partners that you're bringing on, the bigger guys, your track record guys. Hey, here's my deal. Here's why I like it. Here's the market demographic. Here's the people in it. Here's the population. Here's what the population makes. Here's the tenant profile. I'd say, is it multifamily? Is it a hospital? There's a big difference in a deal that's a hospital and a deal that's a multifamily apartment complex. The absolute net lease deal doesn't really require a ton of property management. It's definitely a lot more on the deal, the underwriting of the company, so on. That's a whole different due diligence profile that you go and present to your lender and your equity partner. On the multifamily side, yeah, a lot of it's on the property management. They're very scrutinized. I mean, who are they? Who's the team? Who's the partners? How many guys are they managing? How many leasing guys are they managing? What's the fee structure? I mean, down to the little stuff like what's the community asset management fee? Well, it's $35 at this property. Well, it's $50 across the street per lease. $15 per lease over a 3-year hold divided by a 4 cap. That might be $500 or $600 grand in value, right? Little things like that you're not typically thinking about. Having the luxury of being able to see the ground up side now. What kind of cabinets do you have? Is it asphalt gray or is it agreeable gray? Okay, on the Sherwin-Williams perspective, that's like number 259 and 256. It matters. Does it match the floor? What's the lighting? Is it warm light? Is it cool light? What kind of appliances do you have in there? I need new appliances. What's the hold time? Are they in stock? Or are you going to have to wait 6 months for those appliances to come in? Okay, well, if you got to wait 6 months for the appliances, how much are you going to be able to push rent? Are you going to be able to push rent by $50? Is it going to be $100? So, I mean, they really go into like hardcore deep dive on every single aspect of that property. And then you have your other pieces like partnership, profits, insurance, taxes. I don't know if you know this, but when a multifamily property closes, you always litigate the property value because the taxing jurisdiction will come in and they'll try and put the new value on there and up your taxes. So you got to go in and litigate. You have to have an attorney that knows how to do that. You put all these pieces together, but a lot of this can be done independently before you ever even approach anybody. I would say for anyone starting out, avoid listed deals. If it's a large brokerage shop, your chance of closing that deal is like wildly slim.
Because they only answer calls from people they know have closed before.
And if you see it in your email, it's because the first 50 guys they went to said no to it, and they opened it up to the broader public. Like, deals that are sweet are pocket deals. They never hit an email. It's like raw financials that go directly to the partners, and they're like, hey, here's what we're doing last month. Here's the last 3 months. Here's what it looks like annualized out. What are you guys thinking on this? I think we're going to trade or we're going to do an inside recap like on this deal. That's kind of what those look like. You can go make a deal on something listed, but it's not going to get you
right.
You're not going to go make a name off that, right? And a lot of people won't take your time either. Hey, I've got a deal from CBRE that I want to go close. Great, I do too. I've got 100 of them on my desk. Like, they won't do that. But if you go to them and say, hey, I'm friends with so-and-so, I've been meeting with so-and-so, and he's got a deal that he's selling. He's not going to list it. He's keeping it off market, and it's this, and this. It's in this area. Rents are here. This is what I want to do to it. He's in a weird situation. It's in it's an opportunistic structure you can put together. They'll go take that down with you.
So how do you find those off-market deals?
Back to the massive action. I was in a FedEx, getting passport photos. Met the guy that brings all the equity to very large. I think they are the largest developer in DFW. So anybody wants to look that up, they can probably go figure out who it is. But I'd say right place, right time might be part of it. Reaching out to anyone and everyone, just knowing all the players in the market and catching them and saying, hey, are you going to take this out? They might not, especially if you can come to them and say, hey, I will pay you the price that you want. Maybe I might even pay you a little extra if I have a structure that allows me to pay you what you need. Will you entertain me without having to go through a marketing process? Because a lot of people don't want to do that. A marketing process is it sucks. It's time intensive. It's imagine having to answer calls from 100 interested clients that want to buy your stuff, and they all have questions, tons of questions on your property because they're running their own due diligence, right? And the brokers can answer so many of those, but a lot of it's tribal knowledge, if you will, especially on the nitty-gritty stuff that really makes or breaks the deal.
So you touched on something that I think is really important to tease out, which is if you don't have that experience, structure the deal in a way to where it's more valuable to them, right? So
yes.
what does that deal structure actually look like? Like if you've never done it before and you're approaching one of those equity partners and you say, look, this is how I'll structure the deal.
First deal we did was the hospital. I took 5% of that deal. That was it.
As opposed to?
I did. I took 30% of the apartments that we just closed. You get up to 50-50 when you're signing on when your net worth is equivalent to the bigger operators and you're signing on the note alongside them. That's when you get 50-50 on deals. Or you can go off on your own, but it's very difficult to do the size and scale. Just like if you were a single person trying to just take the whole 100% ownership, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And there's you want to give pieces to other partners too. It's like you might give 5 or 10% of the promote to your GC or to your construction partner, or maybe you have a long term. You get a programmatic with your CPA or something that he's got 100 clients, but he really pays attention to your stuff because you gave him 5% of the promote on the deals, and make sure that you get that extra special tax treatment that might save you 6 figures at the end of the year. Stuff like that. But I took a minute part of that deal. I mean, almost got paid nothing for it up front. Took the net worth, right? Net worth goes up, assets go up, track record, biggest piece, went up, bam. Did a $20 million deal, did all the work for it. I mean, busted my ass for that deal and took a little tiny sliver. Went to the next deal, got 10% of that one. Took a sliver. Went to the next deal, took 20% of that one. Went to the next deal, took 30%. Took 30%. It's kind of how you move up.
I love that. Something that we touched on previously that I definitely want to tease out here is the idea of going for the opportunity as opposed to going for the cash.
Absolutely.
Right. So Grant Cardone, he has, I mean, we've referenced him so many times. He's awesome. Is, you know, it's like if you're a mouse, don't go for the little cheese. Like figure out how to use a crowbar and crack open the fridge to get the whole chunk.
Yep.
Right. And that's something that you did. You sacrificed a lot of that cash up front in order to be able to pursue that opportunity. Right. So you found the people who are willing to make bets on you because you gave them good reasons to make bets on you. And then you said, hey, I'm going to give you this cash up front because I'm actually going for the chunk of cheese in the fridge.
Yep.
Right.
I'm not worried about this $20 million deal. I'm looking for the 40% of the first billion that I do in deals. That's what I'm after. And that's going to take about, 5-7 years if you do it quickly.
Yeah.
But, 100%. And no one's going to listen to you, especially the guys that are worth it, if you're going and asking them for, if your hand's out, it's like, oh, I got to make a fee or I got to do this. Because I learned very quickly. I was in that position of, hey, I need some cheese to live on. But, like, past that, I'm here to learn. It's almost like I kind of view it as it's a PhD that pays you at the end. When you graduate, you walk across, you get your diploma, but you also get handed a very sizable chunk of a portfolio, that's cash flowing and has value to your name and everything else. You got to go make them a deal. You got to bust ass. Do the stuff that they don't want to do. No one wants to read loan documents, but you got to. You got to learn it, and you can't just leave it to the attorney because you have to learn. You have to learn how to tell the attorney or the CPA what needs to be done because they're only going to give you, hey, here's what's out there, but it's on you to make the decision. So you got to know what's right and what's wrong, and the only way to know that is by doing that crap that nobody wants to do. I was dealing with parking spots the other day. I was telling you about that. I don't want to do that, but I'm glad that I learned it because I now know how to A, teach it, and B, handle it on future projects and pay attention for it. But,
and share a little bit more. What was the parking spot headache?
All right, so we bought these apartments, and for one, I had to go back 20 years into public records. That's a plug for the audience. Learn how to understand city records. Learn how to go look that stuff up because that's where the real due diligence is. You find out who's got liens on stuff, who's got where the deeds were transferred, what LLCs they were transferred from. I mean, a lot of that's public information. It has to be. But we're dealing with parking spots, and so the tract that we bought, it was broken up into 3 separate lots that over 20 years were sold to 8 different owners. And then at one point, the apartments were sold. The parking lot behind it, part of it, was sold to a separate owner while we were under contract for the apartments. We didn't know about this. So they sold this lot almost a little bit from out underneath us, but that's another story. But regardless, there was an easement from 2008 that existed, and it was for 7 parking spots for the apartment to use and 14 spots on the other end for the retail property to use that was around it. And you met me at that Ascension. It was one of those little restaurants right next to it. And argued. I was on the phone with him today. I finally got this thing squashed. And I said, hey, I had to go back 20 years into parking and probably, 500-600 pages worth of documents of parking contracts. I mean, just the dullest, just grind your teeth into the pavement type reading. But I had to go through every single word and finally got through it. And I was like, these parking spaces are ours. And went to the partner that originally had owned it. And I was like, hey, I'm sorry. I know we've been back and forth on this. I'm trying to be cordial with you. We're here to play, be good neighbors, and, would love to do something interactive with you. But if you take my parking signs down one more time, I'm going to sue you. And it was, I said, oh, no, okay, I get it. And had the attorney come in and back to have a good attorney that knows people. But I had the attorney come in. I was like, hey, they're definitely his spots. So give him the 7 spaces back.
Just a flavor of the thorns in your side that you experience as you're going through this.
But I mean, just those are the kind of details that I don't think anybody thinks about when they're looking for their first few deals. It's all right. What's my price? What's my cap rate? What's the what's the cash flow, and where's it at in the market? Oh, it's in Dallas. People focus on the very macro stuff, and I did too. And now it's like learning years into it. It's 2 or 3 sentences and a 100-page contract.
It's all on the micro.
Is all
the devil's in
that
the
makes
details.
Or breaks the deal, man. That might hurt my leasing or something.
Yeah.
So,
the devil's in the details.
Yeah.
So circling back around briefly to the equity partners, you mentioned there are a handful of different equity partners. I'm going to try to keep this as focused on circle back to the blueprint as possible. What type of equity partners would you look for to do your first deal? No experience, no nothing.
I didn't know this, honestly. When I first came to Dallas, I didn't even know what a broker-dealer was. I mean, I knew, yes, they're a market maker. They connect buyers and sellers, but that's like basic finance 101 stuff that didn't really understand what the hell that meant. I was bidding on one of my mentors and partners to this day. I was bidding on one of his apartment complexes. And it was when I was officing with my old mentor. And I put a bid in on his deal for $94 million. And he was like, hey, he called me. He goes, who are you? And I was like, oh, I'm Aubrey. I'm bidding on your deal, and I'd like to buy it from you. And he goes, yeah, no, I've never heard of you. So why do you think you can buy this deal? And I was like, well, I'm going to put it together. I'm going to go close it with this group out of Dallas. And he was like, let's go get breakfast. I said, okay. And so we went and sat down, had breakfast, and he met me, and we just kind of went through the whole backstory and gamut and everything else. And he's like, what are you doing out here? And I was like, I'm trying to buy stuff, specifically your stuff. And he was like, well, yeah, I'm trying to buy stuff too, but I've been doing this for 30 years. And I was like, yeah, I know. I find guys like you that I go partner with and go take stuff down, and I basically do all the legwork and all the bus tasks in exchange for a chunk of it. I'm here to learn. Like, I signed up for 20 years of this. Whatever you need, I got it. I'll do my best to bring it. He was like, you want to buy stuff with me? And I was like, yeah, I think I will. What else are you looking at? He goes, stuff that looks just like that. And I was like, okay, yeah. And I mean, I've been with him for 2 years, but in that relationship, he introduced me to one of his partners. And one of his partners is he runs a broker-dealer shop. And a broker-dealer shop is, in the simplest terms, it's an equity house. It is a investor relations house. It's they're SEC regulated. They're all licensed. They've got their series 66 and 7s, and Rob's got to have his. I think it's a series 24. Allows you to actually hold other licenses underneath you, but they can go out and solicit securities. So they can go out to, they could go to you, I mean, anybody, and they can go raise money from those individuals. They raise from retail investors. Wildly helpful. Okay, I mean, I'm talking, this is active investors on any one deal might be 1,000 guys that look at something. I think it goes out to more than that. But, I mean, we had a land deal. I found some land, that New Braunfels land I was telling you about. It's like $4.5 million. Did a webinar. Had it raised before the webinar ended. It's a 45-minute webinar, and it was raised. I mean,
and was that webinar you pitching to the equity partners?
Yeah, and it was mainly Rob, the guy that runs the shop. But yeah, it was our land, and he was like, "Hey, this is what we're gonna go do." I put together the deck, and I put together the PPM, and went out and he did that in 45 minutes. So that's powerful, right? That's $4.5 million that you could just raise like that. Larger deals, I mean, he has the ability. He does 50-60 million on some of the bigger stuff. May take 4 or 5 months to do something like that, but having someone that's dedicated doing that was wildly helpful. You don't just get that when you start. I mean, that took me 4 or 5 years to go graduate into, but the mortgage brokers help me find the equity. The same guys that find the debt, a lot of those guys will find the money as well. Probably the first deal is going to look like ours. It was a specialty shop that it's called Flagship Groups. They specialize anywhere from like $2 to $7 million, and they'll help you write the check. They're going to take a chunk of the deal. They're going to take a chunk of the promote. You're going to go make them the deal, just like you make everybody else. They don't just want a return on their cash; they want a piece of it, and that's fine because you're in it for getting the deal done.
Right.
Shops like that are out there, and the same guys that you reach out to. I would say property management's not going to help you there, but the operators, the GCs, the lenders, the mortgage brokers, they'll lead you to those kind of folks. And then when you're reaching out to, like I said, the first few $100,000, $1 million that we raised, those were family and friends that went and talked to. Were like, hey, you guys know some hitters out there that can do like 5, 10, 15 million. They're like, yeah, but let's get a couple deals done, then maybe we sit you down in front of those guys. So you can graduate into the bigger guys. But point is, from reaching out, talking to all those people, they'll introduce you in the right direction, especially if you're worth the time. And I mean, they'll very quickly tell you if, hey, your deal sucks or whatever, because they have a reputation to uphold as well. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dude, this has been so good.
Yeah.
Okay, wrapping up some rapid fire questions that'll hopefully be a bit more rapid. Is how or who do you define as incredible?
I would say, and this is something I've been almost chasing, someone incredible is somebody that has gone out, like you, like me, chasing what they're looking for. And I would say accomplishing, winning, yes, that's a big piece of it, but it's having the grit to almost grit your teeth through it and just go get it done and be able to wake up every day and smile through it. I think one of my, might be a little cheesy, but one of my heroes, my Meemaw, she, that woman has just had the hardest life I think I've ever witnessed personally. And she wakes up every day, smiles, and just has this perk in her step. She tells me every day, did you smile and have a perk in your step? I could be having the worst day possible. Just give her a shot. Hey, you doing all right? It's like, oh, well, no, the entire world's on fire, but I've got a smile on and a perk in my step. I'm like, I love that. That's incredible to me. To be able to just grit and smile through all the adversity and be comfortable with being uncomfortable, just being able to go again and again, day in and day out, but also have, I think people that are incredible are able to turn it off when you need to, be present with family and friends and loved ones, and have a balance in your mind. Be able to say, I think being able to kind of argue against your mentors and the people who you're learning from, very select situations, but extremely important because they're not always right. And so having I wouldn't say it's boldness, but bravery to go and fight for what you know is truly right is incredible.
Yeah. And there's a lot to be learned from challenging things and questioning things. Absolutely.
Yeah.
What is the most frequently gifted or frequently appreciated book that you recommend to people?
Oh, gosh.
You've recommended a couple really great ones to me that I enjoyed ripping through.
I would say just a plug to the Rich Dad series. I mean, that was a great... You can go as beginner, as advanced as you want to take those books, right? They have very beginner books, and then they have ABCs of property management, simple stuff, but then they also have tax-free wealth, which is pretty advanced stuff on how to use an S-corp and how to keep your cash. If you want to jump into kind of more thought-provoking, I mean, Atlas Shrugged is a great one. There's one I've read through the first couple of chapters. It's called Pragmatic Capitalism. That's a good one. Let's see. I like the, I don't know if you heard of Richard Wilson, but Family Office. It's literally how to build a family office. Talks a lot on, if you want to understand investors, very much what they go through in their mind. It's wealthy individuals. Typically, it's, these are families with $50 million, $100 million in net worth. That's when you start one, and what they have to go through to their investment mandates, their strategies, to learn who you're talking to when you want to go raise a big check. That's who it's going to be from. And how to speak with them and how to understand their needs and wants is, I think, very important. So, a couple of those be anything in 10X, Cardone, Massive Action. I mean, one of the old school ones right there.
10X is absolutely fantastic. The idea of take your goal, 10X it, and then calculate what you think it'll take to deliver on that goal, and then 10X that.
Yeah. I'd say last one is shareholder letters from Warren Buffett.
That's good.
The old school ones.
Yeah.
All the way back to when he first started. I mean, if you just want to learn like macro economy down to micro events to what was going on and how he was compounding at like 20% a year in his company for
his numbers are crazy.
Decades, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, people are like, oh, he had a good bid in Geico or he had a good bid in Coca-Cola. It's like, yeah, but he also had 40 years of, just being a monster.
He was there for those big wins. He was
Yeah.
positioned for the big wins.
Yeah. And if you listen to him speak, it's so simple. Just don't overcomplicate things.
Right.
I mean, it's know your strategy, know what you want, be clear, be concise, and just go attack it every day, all day.
I love it. I love it. All right, Aubrey, it's been a pleasure.
100%.
I'm sure we're going to do this again. We're
Yes.
going to have some more future episodes once you hit bigger and bigger goals.
Yes.
And, yeah, I loved having you.
It's a great time. Absolutely. Thanks for having me.